Yes, we can.
Start my video. Okay, so we're going to get started. Good evening again, everyone, and welcome back. Thank you all for joining us again this evening as we continue our financial literacy series. I am your host, Jerome Franks, President of CFA Society, the Bahamas. For those of you not familiar with us, the Society is an organization of financial investment professionals who have or are pursuing the CFA designation. Please feel free to visit our website, cfasociety.org/Bahamas. We will have recordings of the presentations as well as information about the Society and CFA designation. Okay, so last week we discussed investments, and this week we will be discussing the topic home ownership, the fundamentals. Now, real estate typically falls under investments, but I think we can agree that it's a huge topic and for the most part really deserves its own seminar. For most of us, our home will be our biggest investment or the biggest investment that we make in our lives. So it is important that we educate ourselves and stay up to date with relevant new information that may impact our ability to even become homeowners, or I guess maybe even investment property owners for those of us who already have a property and looking to perhaps expand, right? So as usual with our seminars, please feel free to ask your questions at the end. You can submit it directly to the host using the chat feature in Zoom, or you can also raise your hand and speak directly with our presenter, right? So today we are joined by Matt Sweeting as he presents the topic, home ownership, the fundamentals. Matt is a licensed real estate broker who has practiced real estate for 15 years. As the CEO of One Oak Bahamas, Matt currently leads a team of real estate experts in their ambition to offer the most exceptional service in Bahamas real estate. Thank you, Matt, for joining us today, and I hand it over to you.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for the invite, and thank you so much for the audience. And I look forward to a very, very engaging conversation. I don't know about the previous presenters, but I'm going to require your texting in the chat and maybe even you turning on your mic, because I want to be sure that when we leave here that you've left with some very tangible information. And I've attended quite a number of meetings in real estate and in corporate Bahamas where after it's done, I'm like, what did we really get? And so I want to make sure this evening that you're getting information that you'll be able to use not only throughout your professional career, but also throughout your real estate career as well, right? And we all have a real estate career, and that's what we'll talk a lot about tonight, how every one of us should be taking real estate so much more serious than we're taking it right now. As Jerome mentioned earlier, I've been in real estate for 15 years, been in a number of real estate agencies, and have seen the market at its lowest. And we'll talk tonight about how the market has experienced some of its best times within our careers. So, you know, I have a presentation prepared for you, and I have an attachment that I'll attach a little bit later on in this presentation that you'll be able to take home, because I appreciate that I'm talking to a wide audience here. I imagine that I'm talking to people who haven't started their real estate journey yet. Some people who have purchased real estate already. Some people that have investment properties, that have developed properties, or that don't even know where to start. And so I've kind of crafted the presentation tonight to talk to all of you, and your engagement is going to be extremely helpful in achieving that. So without further ado, let's jump into what I have to share with you this evening. So tonight we're going to talk about the fundamentals of real estate. What I want to help everyone achieve is to understand real estate better. And so tonight I'm going to talk about three things specifically: the mindset, the market, and the mechanics. And I believe that this is the equation that I want to help you to have a better understanding of, more clarity around after we're completed. And so I believe that you first need to have the right mindset. I believe that we all need to broaden the way that we think about real estate, and we'll explore that. So get ready to type in the chat in a moment. And then we're going to talk about the market. After you have the mindset, then what is the market like? What are the circumstances and the environment that we're in, and how does that affect me? And then after you've understood both of those, then the mechanics. How do I do it, right? I understand the mindset, I understand the market, but technically and logistically, what do I need to do specifically to succeed in real estate? All right. So the mindset is really around this concept that I believe that the large majority of us think about real estate in entirely the wrong way. And I want to talk about a bit of backstory, and I think about my mom, and I think about my colleagues, my sphere of influence, my family. And I also want you guys to chime in here as well. And so get ready to type in the chat, because I'd really like to know how many people in the chat, parents, own their own home. And whilst the chat starts to populate, and you could just put me, you could put I, you could put we, you could put, just put an emoji in there, because I want to know. And what I believe we'll find out from the chat is that a lot of our parents who've been successful enough to own their own real estate, there's something that they share in common. And I see the chat is populating here, and a number of people are saying, yes, their parents were able to purchase their own real estate. If we were to think about that in great detail, what we would realize is that our parents, when they bought their first home, it was their only home. And think about that for a moment, because what that means is they saw the real estate purchase as the end of the journey, the end all be all. And I believe that our generation, and this might be a bit of a controversial statement, but I generally believe that our generation is a bit more ambitious as it relates to what we want to achieve financially, the legacy that we want to leave, and what we want to achieve in our careers and our lifestyle. And I believe that that mindset of owning your own home and ending there is something that we need to do away with. I want to share a number of photos in a moment, and I want us to realize how everything that you want to achieve in life has a bit of a connection to real estate. And I want you to broaden your mind from the thought process that it's just some place for me to live and be comfortable, right? So let's jump into a couple of these concepts that I think are helpful. And let's talk about Jason and Tamara first. So Jason and Tamara have done very well at their careers and have the ambition to scale back at work now that they've had their first child. Does anyone see how Jason and Tamara's story might connect to real estate? And I'll welcome you to type it in the chat, or even turn on your mic, raise your hand, and possibly let me call on you so that you could give some feedback here. And if you take too long, I might have to help you out here. But I really want your feedback, because this is going to be helpful towards this entire conversation. So engagement is key. All right, you're slow on the hand raising. Okay, so let me help you with Jason and Tamara. They have the ambition to scale back at work after they've had their first child. As we looked at Jason and Tamara, we'd reason what? Maybe 35, maybe 37. And if that's the case, then you guys there and set with me, and maybe a part of the demographic that we're speaking to this evening are in their 30s or older. Well, how could real estate help Jason and Tamara? And this is a ambition that many of us share. We want to spend more time with our family as they are either born or as they get older. Well, if they own a multifamily property, and there are multiple variables here, but what I'm trying to get you to appreciate is the connection to real estate. And so if they had a multifamily property that was bringing them income or something that they could rent out, possibly on Airbnb, this might put Tamara in a position to scale back sooner than Jason. Raise your hand if you see the connection there between real estate and their ambition. So give me some hand raises. Let me see what we got. Just throw your hand up right quick. Let me make sure we got a live audience that we're talking to. Okay, Narissa, thank you so much. Velma, thank you. Who else we got? Does anyone else see the connection? Okay, good. I appreciate it. All right, go ahead and lower those hands because we got more questions coming up. Kimberly, let's talk about Kimberly. Kimberly is making her way in financial services and recently completed her CAMS and is driven to ensure the struggles she endured, her son would never know. Does anyone see how real estate might connect with Kimberly's ambitions? Kimberly seems to be a bit younger. Her son, maybe 2 or 3. But again, if Kimberly owned her own home that was currently building equity, what she's now doing is ensuring, or at least putting the systems in place so that her son would have some place to live. She could potentially use that equity a little bit later for college. The variables are innumerable. But real estate, even though Kimberly is focused on being successful in financial services, has a direct correlation to her lifelong goals. Let's talk about someone else. Who else we got? We got Brandy and Marcus. And Brandy and Marcus decided to take their relationship to the next level and move in together, right? And many of us might know this, right? If you were young and dating, there was a certain point where your parents said, hey, listen, you can't be bringing no fellas in this house and you can't be bringing no girls in this house. And so if you and Brandy about to take your relationship to the next level, you all need to take it to someplace else. And so we see that if Marcus wanted him and Brandy's relationship to improve, to go to the next level, real estate plays a big factor, right? And so it appears here that Marcus is now, Marcus and Brandy are moving into their own space together. Real estate has some correlation to that as well, right? Who else we got? We got Charlene and Brandon, who want to retire young and support their daughter's medical ambitions. Their daughter wants to be a doctor. They hope their new purchase can help them with their goals. Is there a connection? Well, absolutely there is. Because if Charlene and Brandy, both seemingly ambitious people, decided to use real estate sensibly, and this is ambition I believe we all should have. And when let's stop here for a moment and talk about, I talked about what our parents were, but let me talk about what I think our generation should be thinking. Our generation should be thinking of real estate as the financial ladder to the lifestyle and long-term goals that we want. And if that's the case, then that means that your first home is just that. It's the first home. And you should be strategically moving in real estate so that you could potentially buy and or sell real estate multiple times before you have a strong desire to not move anymore. Let me repeat that. So if you're in your 20s, if you're in your 30s, and possibly even if you're in your 40s, you may not have a difficulty staying with your parents a little bit longer because you don't have Marcus and Brandy issue about bringing people home, right? And so what that means is you might be in a position to buy real estate now, rent the real estate out, and have that money just loading up in your bank account with the ambition of potentially selling your home in the next few years for profit, right? It's an idea. Let's talk about Dolores, getting a bit older here. Dolores was just celebrated as a pioneer in financial services at her retirement dinner. Now she wants to travel the world and enjoy retirement. We all have similar ambitions when we get Dolores' age, but oftentimes what we found is that at retirement, we don't have enough money to even survive, much less travel the world. Well, do we see a correlation between real estate and Dolores' goals? If Dolores had a triplex, some condos, right, that she could potentially put on rent that may cause her to have to reduce her quality of life but still give her some disposable income that put her in a position to travel and enjoy retirement. Real estate has a direct correlation. Let's talk about Randy and Paulo. Both have a few years left in corporate Bahamas and are chatting about what the future looks like after they retire. So they're a little bit younger than Dolores. They still got a couple of years left in corporate Bahamas. But does real estate have a direct correlation? And what I'm trying to get you to appreciate here is that no matter what your life goals are, real estate is a direct correlation. And oftentimes we see as corporate professionals, we're just focused on work, work, work. We want to make it up the corporate ladder because we have not really made the connection yet as our sole goal, because we have not made the connection yet that while I'm making it up the corporate ladder, while I'm becoming more attractive to financial lending institutions, that I should be using this corporate job as a way to mature and succeed in real estate simultaneously. And not just the first time, but multiple times throughout your career. Let's talk about William and Diane. Just received his diagnosis and it's not looking good. As the doctor leaves, they discuss strategic and financial game plan to overcome this obstacle. Do we see any potential connection here between real estate and them overcoming what seems to be a medical issue? There's a direct correlation, absolute direct correlation. If they had apartments, if they had equity, if they had a home, they are now in a position to ensure that whatever those financial expenses are, or not ensure, but they have at least a safety net to assist them in whatever financial concerns they might have. So when we think about the stories that we talked about this evening, and I hope I covered a number of stories that relate to you, that resonate with you, that are people in this audience that are going through things in life and have big time life ambitions, right? You want a better life. You want a better car. You want a more comfortable or safer home. You want the best for your children, right? You want to succeed. You want to be a boss. What I'm trying to help you to appreciate here is no matter what your goals are, real estate is a direct correlation. And so while you think about what your 5 and 10 and 15-year goals are, you need to also appreciate that real estate is closely connected to what that is. And if it wasn't there before, if real estate wasn't, if the CFA designation, the CAMS designation, the whatever else designation you guys have within the society and associated with financial services, you need to put real estate there. And so now we're going to switch gears and we're going to talk about the market. But that message in that first point was change the way that you think about real estate because it is closely connected to what you want to achieve. Let's talk about the market. What's happening in the Bahamas? What are properties selling for? What's the story? Are we in a seller's market? Are we in a buyer's market? What's going on? So I want to share some numbers with you. And this has been an interesting couple of years for financial services, for real estate, for the globe. And when we look at these sales over the last few years, we're seeing an outlier. And so we look at 2019 and the 2, the 4, the 6, and the 8 represent hundreds of millions. So 2 is 200 million, 8 is 800 million. In 2019, we did just above 200 million in real estate sales. Yeah, it's annual. These numbers come from the Bahamas MLS. That acronym stands for the Bahamas Multiple Listing Service. And so I appreciate that these numbers only marginally reflect the real estate data, right? Let me be clear about that. The only way this data that I'm giving you is measured is when a owner comes to me and says, Matt, I want to list my property for sale, and that property actually sells as an exclusive listing because it made it to the MLS, and that transaction was recorded there. So if you put your property in the newspaper and you sold it, it would not be reflected here. So this is only a margin of actual numbers. 2019, just above 200 million. 2020, COVID, just under 200 million, surprisingly, right? 2021, and this was seen in a number of markets and a number of industries. And I'll come to you in a minute, Narissa. Thank you so much. Where we see this major doubling, tripling in real estate sales. So we did somewhere to the tune of about $740 million in recorded transactions on the Bahamas MLS in 2021. And obviously we're only in first quarter, just about to complete second quarter in 2022. But based on those first quarter numbers, it is indicative that we're back to the 2020, 2019 numbers. And so that real estate boom that we experienced, and I contributed to an article with the Tribune, and H.G. Christie and a number of other brokers contributed to this article. And we both resoundingly agreed that 2021 was the absolute best year in Bahamas real estate. We're still seeing the effects of that in 2022 because a number of people, an abundance of people who weren't able to purchase in 2021 are still looking to buy in 22. And so the market is still very, very good. It's a good time to be buying. It's a good time to be selling. Narissa, if that was a real question, I'd ask you to hold that. And so here are these numbers kind of reflected in a different format, right? We see, and so this is taking January to June of 21 and January to June of 22, right? And so we see that the number of listings sold in 2021 was 576.
Hello?
Yes.
Are we supposed to be seeing these figures? Because that's what Narissa was saying, that the slide did not change.
Oh, it did not change. What are you seeing now?
Charlene and Brandon with their daughter.
Okay, all right. There we go. How's that?
Thank you.
My apologies. Thank you so much for that. And so let me see if I can go back here for you, just so that you got it. Yeah. So these were the numbers that I was going over. I'll just run through them again. Just above 200,000 in 2019, just below 200 million. I apologize. So these numbers represent hundreds of millions. 2019, just over 200 million. 2020, just under 200 million. 2021, 700 million. And 2022, it appears if we stay on track based on our first quarter numbers, we'll do the same as 2019, 2020. So this is where we were. And I was showing you the comparison between 2021 and 2022 from January to June. And so let's look at some of these lines. Number of listings sold in period, 576 listings were sold as of yesterday in 2021. And as of 2022, 220 listings were sold. So it's suggesting that the market is down considerably, right? Average days on market was 273 in that period, and 178 in 2022, right? And so it's suggestive that listings are spending less days on market based on this data. What that means is that it is easier for a person to sell their property in 2022 than it was in 2021. Less days on market. And this is why we're of the belief that we have now moved into a seller's market, right? So that means that there are a lot of buyers and there are few listings available, right? Let's talk about average sold price for listings sold in period. 736,000 were sold Jan to June of 2021, and 237 in the same period of 2022. 423 million was sold in the same period of 2021, and we're only up to 52 million in 2022. And so again, there's clear evidence that the market is considerably down from those 2021 numbers. What does that mean for you? Well, it means that if you're buying in this market, I think you need to be a little bit more educated. It is indicative that you might consider working with a real estate agency, no matter which side of the spectrum that you're on, so that they can assist you and help you to navigate in this market that is evidently more challenging than before, right? So here's the reality of a listing being less days on market. What we're seeing happening more than has ever happened in my 15-year career is property is getting over asked. Bidding wars happening. We had one instance, clients that I represented that offered 40,000 above ask on a property and still lost it, right? And so we see properties on the market for 3, 4, 5 days. I had a property recently in Monastery Gardens, Monastery Park, that sold within 7 days. And so what this is telling us that the market is becoming a lot more challenging for both sides of the real estate spectrum. For sellers, they need to be priced very, very competitively to either get the property sold quickly or create a bidding war environment, right? Needs to be staged properly, needs to be marketed properly to get these effects. On the buyer side, you need to go in with education and readiness. And the way that you do that is by using a real estate agent to assist you in what is a very challenging market, right? It happens all the time, and I empathize with people who come to real estate showings not fully appreciating how the kind of market that we're in at the moment. And they come to a property, and I comment to this, on a show, that this is a different market. This is not the market where you come to a property, and I chuckle sometimes. People come to the property one time, then they want to come back another time. They want to bring Grammy and Mummy, and then they will come back a third time with the contractor. In this market, you need to bring everybody one time. Grammy and the contractor need to be there all one shot so that you can be able to make a decision at that moment. This is an unforgiving market on both sides. And so it's imperative that you use a professional to help you. So now that we've talked about the mindset, now that we've talked about the market, let's talk about the mechanics. The mechanics that we'll talk about is technically, Matt, logistically, what do I need to do? Help me to understand the process. And this is the crux of the discussion tonight about the fundamentals of real estate. And so we're going to go through these in detail. The information that I'm going to be sharing with you is coming directly from a publication that I developed called the Perfect Property Guide. And this guide is 24 short read chapters that goes through every step in the buying process. I've condensed this for the purposes of my time tonight, but I'm willing to share this either, I'll attach it in the chat thereafter. And I think we've had an issue before where if you're on a mobile device, you may not get it. So I might give alternative means to be able to get this document from me, right? But this document was generated or produced just for that reason. We oftentimes have to send these varying steps to our clients to help them understand what's the next step or the first step in the process. Because at every step, there's going to be a challenge, right? And we'll talk a little bit about that tonight. So getting started, what's the first step? Well, you need to appreciate that you're going to need to have somewhere to the tune of about 12 to 20% of cash in your bank account to proceed with a real estate transaction. These are under normal circumstances where it's your first transaction, right? And you're not using equity or you're not using someone else's equity. If, for those that don't know, if you had a parent that we talked about before that owns their own home and they own it free and clear, you might be in a position to come up with no money down with someone else extracting equity for you, right? But traditionally, you're going to need somewhere to about 12 to 20%. We'll talk about where that money is and where that's going to come from. And so that's a large sum. You know, if we were to use a sum of 300,000, and that's the number we'll use tonight, we'll figure out how much money that means you need to have in savings, right? You're going to need insurance. If you're going to purchase something for 300,000, then you're going to need at least $300,000 worth of life insurance to make that purchase, right? And closing costs, which we'll talk about in a moment, that are associated with the purchase, right? Those closing costs are 5% government value added tax on the purchase, right? So if you're purchasing a property for 300,000, you're gonna need 5% of that. Could someone tell me in the chat what 5% of 300,000 is? Work with me, guys. A lot. Giovanni, you're right. And Giovanni, sorry, is asking about the guide. I will attach it at the conclusion of my presentation. Yeah, 5% of 30,000, 15. Okay, thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. All right, and then you're going to need a 5% down payment at least. So we need what? Another 15,000. And then you're going to need another 5% for legal costs. Now, some people might jump in the chat and say, but Matt, I thought legal fees were 2.5% on average. And you would be right, but your attorney is going to be producing for you 2 services, and he's going to charge you for both. So it's 2.5 on the conveyance, and it's 2.5 on the mortgage, right? So that's 5%. So where are we now? We had 15,000 for value-added tax on the conveyance, a $15,000 down payment, and then you need 15,000 for legal fees, right? So we're already at $45,000 that you need for the purchase. And then I like to say that you need somewhere between 1% and 2% for miscellaneous, right? Those miscellaneous items could be survey fees. In some cases, we've been seeing more recently than before, where the buyer is paying for the survey costs of the property, right? And just a recent update is what's happening with financial institutions. Before, the lenders would require you or would require the vendor as a closing contingency to produce the survey markers and a survey report. And that's when a surveyor goes out there, he puts the concrete and the flags on all of the boundaries, and he writes a report and says, I visited the property, I put the stakes down, the market, the land that they propose to be selling is actually the case. The recent adjustment that we have seen with a number of financial institutions is that a contingency of approval, not a contingency of closing, a contingency of approval. So Matt goes into the bank and said, I want to buy this house. Before getting approved for that mortgage, they want me to confirm that the stakes are in, right? And so that means that it's required a lot earlier than it was in previous times. And in a couple of transactions that this has come up with, the buyer is paying those fees with the hopes of being reimbursed later, right? That could be about $600. Then you need an appraisal, which could be somewhere to $400 to $600 again. And then you have commitment fees from the financial institution. So I like to say probably about 1% to 2%. And so in total, we're talking about 15 to 17% based on the numbers we just ran that you're going to need in savings to close a transaction. And the bank wants to be able to see all of these in your account before they could submit for approval internationally, oftentimes. So let's switch gears a bit. We talked about how much money is required and what you need to do to get started. Let's talk about why you might consider using an agent in the first place. And this is kind of geared towards buyers, but it's similar for someone who's selling a property as well. So you might use an agent because they have access to the Bahamas MLS. As only agents get access to this private information on the MLS, it is a valuable tool to be able to see every listing that's there, how long it's been listed, and some supplemental data that the public does not have access to. Agents have market knowledge, right? They've been working in real estate for a considerable period of time. It is their full-time profession. And so they have a value proposition that might be of use to you. They negotiate for a living. And so negotiation might be another reason why. They could appreciate that the house down the street, based on the data on the MLS, sold for $10,000 less than this current owner is asking. And so maybe when we offer, we're going to offer $15,000 less, $10,000 less, just based on where the market is. And then what we'll talk about tonight, as well as assembling the Avengers. And I'll explain that in a moment. But what you get to do with a real estate agent is to delegate, as opposed to you sorting through newspapers and sorting on Facebook, sorting through Facebook Marketplace and real estate websites. A real estate agent is going to do that for you. And here's the biggest secret in real estate that I'm going to share with you right now. If you are looking to buy real estate, the realtor that you choose to use, their service to you is absolutely free. I'll repeat it. Because the seller 99.9% of the time pays the real estate commission, that means that if you call Matt or Jane Doe to represent you in real estate, their service to you is absolutely free. We'll talk about why that's important. So let's talk about assembling the Avengers, right? What I mean when I say this is that you know, I always crack the joke that the Avengers are assembled to overcome the enemy, and the enemy that these Avengers are helping you to overcome in some people's cases is homelessness. And I'm of the belief that if you do not have a home of your own, based on the way that word is made up, you are homeless. And so these Avengers are going to help you to overcome homelessness, right? And the realtor is an Avenger. The attorney is an Avenger. The insurer is an Avenger, right? The lender is an Avenger. You want to make sure that you're putting together the right team to help you to overcome this enemy, right? And you want to make sure that that Avenger that you're working with has a superpower, right? You know, I believe that in every industry, and you guys would know this in financial services, is that there's someone who is exceptional in every industry, and unfortunately, there's a loser in every industry as well. And you want to ensure that the person that you're choosing to represent you in the biggest transaction ever is an Avenger. This person is exceptional at their craft, that they're going to make you a priority, and they're going to help you to get it done. Because we just went back to how much money you have on the line here. You have potentially $45,000 at stake, and you cannot risk losing any dollar of that. And so the script that you see here is going to be used in determining who is going to represent you in real estate, in lending, or in lending, yeah, in your mortgage, and who's going to represent you in law, right? So you got your realtor, you got your lawyer, and you got your lender. And this script is all in the document and goes through each of these items one by one, but this has been condensed. But essentially, they read the same way. Hi, just found your details online, looking for an agent, an insurer, a lawyer to help me, a lender to help me find my perfect property. My name is blank. This is what we're looking for. I want to complete this by such and such a time. We already have financing in place and are qualified for blank. You want to ask them a series of questions. What makes you different from the other agents, insurers, lenders, attorneys? What kind of properties do you most usually sell? Or what kind of law do you specialize in? How long have you been in Bahamas real estate? Are you the best at your company, and are you full-time? We really want to make sure that we want to use someone who's going to make our search a priority, our objective a priority, and get back to us in an efficient manner. We're available to talk more via the contacts below. Please get back to us soon. My thought is that you want to send this to a number of professionals in each industry, because you just cannot risk working with the loser at that company in that industry, right? And so this is when I talk about assembling the Avengers, this is what I'm talking about. How do you find, because you don't know who's the best agent at my company, you don't know who's the best agent in the country. And so the way to do that, the way to interview and choose the professional that's going to represent you, is by going through this process with a number of people in each industry. I hope that makes sense. And again, all this information is in that document. Why would you use a buyer's agent? Well, there's a term that I think is very, very key that makes a buyer's agent unique. And I like to draw the example about you driving down the road and you see a sign, and maybe it's Marcus and Brandy who we talked about earlier, and Brandy says to Marcus, excuse me, Brandy says to Marcus, honey, this is the one, call them now. And when Marcus gets on the phone with the agent whose sign was posted in front of the property, Marcus has just made his first mistake. Because what he has done is he is now in a conversation or have engaged the person who has fiduciary obligations to the seller. And let's define that. A fiduciary is a person or organization that acts on behalf of another person or persons, putting their client's interests ahead of their own with a duty to preserve good faith and trust. Being a fiduciary thus requires being bound both legally and ethically to act in the other's best interest. Now, if the agent whose sign was posted in front of the yard has a fiduciary obligation to the seller, where does that put you? Right? I compare it to you going through divorce proceedings and deciding to use your spouse's lawyer for the sake of saving money. It would be a mistake on your, because an agent brings is that they have a fiduciary obligation to you. And so it's important that when you're deciding to engage in real estate, that you need to engage a realtor for yourself, right? I hope that makes sense. And I hope I'm not moving too fast. So now that we've done that, Brandy and Marcus reached out to a buyer's agent. They've seen a number of properties because, you know, if you and I go out together, I'm going to suggest, well, hey, I know you guys love this home, but how about we look at a couple others just so that you're certain that this is the one. And so Brandy and Marcus went to look at a number of properties, and man, I thought a slide was in between here. And there's some keys that you want to employ, some tactics that you want to employ when looking at properties. And one of those tactics or strategies is to be quiet, right? And I'm certain that that slide is in here somewhere. Yeah. Okay. One of those keys is to be quiet, right? Oftentimes the mistake that people make when they go into a property, they say, Brandy goes into property and said, honey, I love it. We go put the kitchen there, and we're gonna make the 2 rooms, we can make that into 1 room so we can have a nice master suite, and we're gonna put the playground in the back for our son. And then they talked to the owner and said, we absolutely love your house. You've done an amazing job. We got to have it. See, what they're doing there is hurting their negotiation ability by talking too much. And so one of the things you can do when you the property, and then you want to ask questions, right? So while I'm suggesting that you be quiet, your goal is to be an investigator and ask the questions that you need to ask. How long has it been on the market? Why are you selling? Is the current list price the appraised value? Do you know what it's appraised for? When last was it appraised, right? What are other homes in the area selling for? What's the crime like in the area? Has there been any crimes in the area, right? And so you need to be an investigator, because any information that they tell you, has there been any offers on the property? What was the lowest offer? Some of the information they should not say, but oftentimes they slip up and communicate. And so when you do that, what you're doing now is strengthening your negotiation ability to get the absolute best price possible. So your agent, now that we've looked at property, now that we've employed the tactics that is going to help you get the best, use the best strategies, the goal is to get the best price. And some of the things we're going to use as your agent, or that should be used in helping you to achieve the best price, is how many days has the property been on the market? What's the level of motivation of the seller? What other properties are available? Some of the strategies that I've recently had success with is making a letter of introduction to the seller, right? Oftentimes when there's a bidding war or a seller that's firm on their sales price, a personal note or a letter of introduction. We did this with a client who's buying a lot off McKinney Drive. And I helped him craft the letter. I didn't represent the seller, I represented him solely. And the letter said, hey, listen, I'm a young man looking to buy property. I work on the defense force and I could see myself raising my family here. And that letter helped him to get some, I think we ended up getting about 5,000 off the price when they had already said in verbal communication with me, we're firm on the price, right? Going to your showing with a deposit confirmation, right? A receipt from your attorney. Having made that deposit already shows a firm level of seriousness when buying property. And also a pre-qualification letter. A number of financial institutions will produce for you a letter that says Jane Doe is qualified for such and such. That'll be an approval in principle, but it's an approval nonetheless. And all of these things are going to help you to now get 5,000, 10,000, potentially more thousands off the asking price, right? So the next steps. The same script that we used earlier when we talked about that script you could use is the same script that I would use with the attorney and multiple law firms, right? Making the deposit would be one of the next steps as well after you've chosen the attorney. That deposit will never, initially not be held by the owner's attorney. So just to go back, as we were talking about the sales process, after we've made the offer on the property and it's been accepted by both parties, what's going to happen is the next step that's expected is for you to make a deposit to your attorney saying that you want to move forward with this transaction, all right? So you made that deposit and now the agreement for sale is going to be produced. That sales agreement requires not only diligent and meticulous checking by yourself, but also your attorney to make sure that you're protected in that agreement, right? And some of the things you're going to look out for is the duration of the transaction, the duration of the agreement. What are the terms of the purchase, right? What is the financing clause, and the like. And these things are very, very important. You want to align the ducks and make sure that before you get to this point, that you've already ensured that you have the other items that we talked about earlier, your pre-qualification in place, chosen your attorney, understand the process of buying real estate, read through this entire document so that you can. The script that I use, again, could be used with your lender. And so you could reach out to First Caribbean and you could reach out to Scotia and you could reach out to RBC and pick a branch and send a letter directly to their branch manager or that branch manager and say, hey, I'm looking to purchase real estate. This is what I'm looking to buy. And I've been pre-qualified from your primary bank for such and such, but I'm looking to get a lender who's going to make me a priority. Can you refer me to the best lender within your branch? You're going to need an appraisal. We talked about this before, that's going to cost you somewhere to the tune of about $400 to $600, depending on the value of the property. And then when we talk about closing quickly, it is very, very important that you've assembled the right team. And one of the things that I always suggest to clients who are looking to choose an attorney is I like to refer attorneys who do not represent criminals. What that means is that they are not oftentimes serving clients at court, right? So does the attorney do litigation? Do they specialize in litigation? How much of their practice is built on litigation, right? So if you have an attorney that's kind of 50-50 conveyancing or maybe 80-20 litigation versus conveyancing, it suggests, doesn't specifically mean, but it suggests that the predominance of their time is focused on being at court, keeping people out of jail, and working on court matters, as opposed to in office, answering your call and making sure you don't lose your money, right? And so how to close quickly? By choosing the right professionals to work with you. So kind of wraps it up. I'm going to attach it as soon as I'm done here. And as if you have any questions, I'd like to hear them. let's talk about some things. I wanted to make it short. I wanted to kind of condense this document so that we could kind of get through this and get to some questions. And so if you had any questions, I'll take them now. And if not, I'll be on for a minute that you might have a question later.
Hi, Mud. This is Kriston from the CFA Society. So
Yes.
basically, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through the chat and read off any questions that we received. We do have quite a bit of questions for you.
Okay.
So I'll get started. Firstly, who were the key buyers driving property sales in 2021? Were they foreigners or locals?
That's a great question. And I kind of missed that on the presentation that the average sales price in 2021 was 743. In 2022, it's down back to 200,000. And so it's suggestive that the predominance of the activity in 2021 was higher end and foreign buyers.
Okay, yeah, that's what I figured when I saw the number, because that number was was quite high. Next question: do you know what banks are offering indemnity insurance? I thought they stopped offering that option.
No, I think most, well, the banks that I know for certain that offer a 5% down payment, because that's the reason why someone would ask about indemnity insurance. And just for the context of people that aren't familiar with this term, the bank really wants 10% from you. The exception is when indemnity insurance is employed, and they're indemnifying, an insurer is indemnifying the bank for the 5% that you don't necessarily have in cash. And so I'm pretty certain we've been doing a lot of business with First Caribbean, and I'm pretty certain that they still offer indemnity insurance. I couldn't factually speak to any of the others.
Okay, great, thanks. Do you recommend potential home buyers to get pre-qualified before they start house shopping?
Yes, I strongly suggest that being one of your first steps. And as we talked about in the presentation, it puts you in a position of power. And oftentimes people are reluctant to share that information either with their realtor or the sellers, in the thought that, you know, if you tell someone that you're trying to negotiate with, I have $100 in my pocket, that I might not be willing to give it to you at 80 anymore. I have not seen that happen. I think this only puts you in a position of power to be able to negotiate, saying, hey, listen, I have $100, I only willing to spend 80 of it. And so having that letter in hand really helps you to get a better price and negotiate from a stronger position.
Okay, great. This is a good question. Building versus buying, which one makes the most sense in the current market?
Yeah, that's a great question, and it's definitely on a case-by-case basis. The last time I had this question, I talked about a scenario where this gentleman, a hotelier, bought a lot. He was maybe qualified for 150,000. He bought a lot that was 100,000, and this was in Coral Breeze. And if you don't know that community, it's a Coral Harbor community that didn't lose its value, but what happens in real estate, the way that we determine value is what we call comparables, right? And so if the homes that are neighboring me now start to sell for $100 less per square foot, it would affect the value of this home, right? And so that was happening in Coral Breeze. And so he was stuck with this property because even though he was going through financial strains, he couldn't sell it because now he would have needed to sell it for more than he would needed to earn more than he could sell it for. So he was stuck with it. And so and I come back to the question, it's on a case-by-case basis. Construction prices could have considerably increased in 2021, 2022. And so it varies. There's no blanket answer for that. It really depends on that particular person's story.
I guess as a follow-up to that, I guess in your day-to-day work, what are you seeing more individuals do? Are you seeing more persons buying or choosing to build?
Buying.
Okay, got it, got it. Another question, which area of New Providence is the hotspot right now?
West has always been, well, not always. West throughout my career has always been the hottest. More specifically in the West, gated communities is the next thing in the West. So you got West and then gated, right? We've seen properties in developments like West Winds or Charlottesville or Serenity do very, very well in terms of maintenance of value. So how that property is valued from years later. Some people originally bought in West Winds, hypothetically, for 80,000. And now those lots are, the highest I've seen is somewhere to tune about 150. And so, yeah, West and then gated.
I guess, what do you consider West? I guess, give me an exact cutoff
West,
point.
yeah, West would be Blue Hill and west of that. That we generally call that, or I generally call that, the line that separates east from west, but it could vary, right? Because some people oftentimes say, well, I don't be South Beach or I don't be Carmichael. They may want further west, but that's the line that I usually draw between east and west.
Okay, fair enough, fair enough. What is the best route for someone to acquire real estate if they're not employed in corporate Bahamas?
Yeah, one of the things, and we want to do a educational event around this, because what we've been finding oftentimes is we have two instances right now where someone has the income, right? They have the liquidity, some of the things that we talked about. So they have the cash and savings, but they own their own business and they're not banking properly. And this is happening more and more, where we as business professionals, and I fall in that category as well, where real estate or realtors are considered self-employed. And so it's imperative, onus is on us to ensure that if we say that we make 100,000, 60,000, 40,000, or whatever that number is, that our bank records reflect that. And so we as self-employed people or independent contractors need to treat it like a business. And so we need to ensure that our business is paying us a salary every week, even if we got to circle that money right back. But there needs to be, when you sit with your banker 2 years from now, because they want generally about 2 years of bank records, we need to be able to see that you said that you make $750, $1,000 a week. Show me it from coming from your company account to your personal account every single week without fail. And so I think the failure of self-employed people is often that mistake of not banking intelligently.
Got it. Another question. You mentioned a property that sold at 40K above asking. In this current market, I guess, how often do you see that happen? Is that pretty common, or?
It depends. No, not very common. Not very common. Let me just answer it like that. No, it is not super common for that to happen. But when a property is priced exceptionally, there's some variables that create this bidding war environment. This was in Seabreeze, this one instance that I'm talking about, and then another instance in Carmichael. The property in Seabreeze was exceptionally priced. There is a belief behind these bidding wars that even though I'm offering above ask, it still has the equity value. Does that make sense? So if I remember correctly, I think it was listed at 440, 430. And my client, who again ended up losing that bidding war, we ended up going like 480 on it. But there was a belief that the property was worth 525, 40. It was right on the Seabreeze Canal in the back there. Then another instance on Carmichael, property was listed at 99,000. It was a house in disrepair. But we still believe that the property alone was worth 85,000. And so then that, as I was kind of strategizing with my client, if the property is worth 85,000, it's suggestive that the building that's there, no matter what condition it is worth more than 15,000. We got some room to move. We ended up offering 105 on this. We did it quickly, did it with the pre-qualification letter, so as to put our offer above all others, and we won that.
That's very interesting, actually. I guess what do you think leads to those kind of scenarios? Is that the seller not, I guess, understanding the value in their home, or what do you think leads to those scenarios where that happens?
Well, oftentimes it's a strategy. I mean, I'm negotiating with a seller right now who he has an appraisal. His property is on West Bay. He has an appraisal that reads 1.1. I don't believe, when we look at the data, we've been seeing properties from list to sale price in some instances, more often than not, and these bidding wars are exceptions, that are getting somewhere between the tune of 5 to upwards of 20% lower than list price. What that means is that someone who is strategically pricing a property needs to take all of those factors into consideration, and price the property so as to create that environment to create a bidding war. You can't be overpriced for the market and expect a bidding war to happen. So these variables are sometimes strategic on the seller agent side to try to create that environment, create that scenario.
Understood. And you mentioned appraisals. So I guess with appraised value and what homes actually sell for, what kind of discrepancies do you usually see between a selling price and an appraisal?
Yeah, I think that number is accurate. We're seeing anywhere between five, and it varies, because again, the appraisal that I was looking at was a 4-year-old appraisal. But it varies. We're seeing between 5 to 20% from, if your property is appraised at 100,000, it's a strong likelihood that we're probably going to get 85 to 90 for it. More often than not. There are exceptions to every rule.
Understood. Can you speak to how the real estate market is faring in Grand Bahama and the other family islands?
Right. No. I know that I know some of the hot islands. Abaco has rebounded considerably. There's considerable interest in Abaco. Grand Bahama is still generally soft, but I have been seeing some activity there. I cannot speak very intelligently about Grand Bahama. Eleuthera, considerable interest there. Bimini is booming.
Okay, great. Well, I guess you said Bimini is booming. Oh, well, what's really been driving the sales in Bimini as of late?
Yeah, and again, I mean, even for international sales, again, what's of great concern to international buyers is proximity to the U.S. And constant air traffic, right? So how long is it going to take me to leave from New York to get there, and the frequency of flights? Do I need to wait a week to be able to get back home? And so Bimini has a lot of those things. Great location, very, very close to the US, frequent air travel, and great real estate as well. And so, my colleagues there, we don't have any representation. One Oak doesn't have any representation in Bimini, but my colleagues there at Coldwell Banker, I see a lot of the inventory that's being moved is property that's near to the Hilton, I think, is there. And development surrounding that.
Cool. You mentioned that a real estate agency that represents you, their service is free. Can you expand on that?
Certainly. So there are two sides of a real estate transaction. There's the listing side, and then there's the selling side. And as I was commenting earlier, I was drawing the illustration about Brandy and Marcus, who drove by a property and they found that property interesting. And if Brandy said, Marcus, call them now, Marcus is going to speak to the listing agent. That listing agent has fiduciary obligations. He is loyal to the seller of the property. And so it's imperative that anyone that's looking to buy real estate employs a buyer's agent. A buyer's agent works with you for free because the seller 99.9% of the times pays the real estate commission. So that means if the seller is paying the real estate commission, the services that that buyer's agent is providing for you is free.
Okay, great. I see Jerome has his hand up to ask a question, so I'm gonna ask him to unmute and he can go ahead and ask.
Hi, Matt.
Hey there, brother.
Can you, this is a broad question, but can you speak to the impact Airbnb has had on the real estate market?
Yeah, I think it is. So what we found is that a lot of people who may not have considered a second home before are now considering it. And Airbnb, as we kind of opened with mindset, Airbnb has been one of the biggest factors in changing that mindset, right? The mindset of, hey, I got my own home, I out of the game. Because now what we're seeing is that when I travel and when a lot of us travel, we want a native experience. And or we want to stay more affordably, or both. And so Airbnbs have had a considerable impact on real estate, where people are now looking for properties that are going to be available for Airbnb. They're in these ideal areas, close to downtown, in the West, those kinds of things, to be able to buy so that they could flip. But on the flip side of it, a number of communities, gated communities, have restricted Airbnb, like a Sandy Port, for example, restricted Airbnb because it, in their opinion, there are a number of reasons why they wouldn't. So there's a security risk. There are people in and out of the property. The noise, we know that travelers that are in and out, they have very little concern about noise restrictions. So those are a number of the concerns that lead to gated communities restricting Airbnb.
Thanks, Matt.
Yep. Yeah. And while you load the next question, one of the things that I think me and Jerome have had some conversations about before, and I've talked to a number of professionals about, is this concept of either the idea of potentially building condos or what I'm calling a detached duplex. And I like to run through this scenario real quick about, if we were to buy a property in Carmichael Road, we had guessed that our property is at maximum, let's call it $80,000, right? And let's assume that you were still able to achieve $100 per square foot in construction. So I just want to use round numbers here, right? And let's assume that we're going to build a 2,000 square foot building, 1,000 square foot on either side of the duplex, right? So we were able to build that building, $100 a square foot. We're now at 200,000. The lot cost us $180,000. So now all in at $280,000. If you were to sell that duplex, the duplex maximum yield in Carmichael, maybe 320. That's pushing it, right? But let's use 320, right? So you have a potential maximum return on investment of $40,000, right? And I hope everybody's following me here. The idea I'm proposing to all professionals who are in real estate and fit that criteria I talked about earlier, change from the mindset of buying a home and staying in it now to the buy and build, and then buy and hold, right? And so if you, same duplex, same square footage, but now they do not share a wall. I hope this makes sense. Same footprint, same 2-bedroom, 1 bath each side, but now they do not share a wall and they're on the same property. What you can do is condominiumize those units and sell them individually. Now the question is, what is a 2-bedroom worth on Carmichael as a freestanding building? And we could reason the building alone is worth $200,000 conservatively. And so now we have potentially $400,000 on the same footprint, a slight adjustment up for an additional wall and the variance in the roof, but generally it's the same footprint. And so the profit potential though goes up considerably. And I think this is a real hack in real estate that people need to pay closer attention to. The next thing that I think is an exceptional idea is looking in areas that are mostly commercial, and but there's still some residential homes along the street, right? So one that I'm very, very impressed by is that one on Soldier, Zion Boulevard and Blue Hill Road. And everybody would have drove there. It's next to Prince William. And we see, I don't know if you remember before, but that was a rundown old house. We didn't even know that lot was that big. And now they've turned it into a triplex commercial building. And they still got a lot of land to do some things. Matter of fact, I see them building what looks to be a bar or something of the sort out there now. And so, you know, you could buy a house for house price, make the conversion, and then just bank off that for years. And, you know, again, depending on where you are in the journey, sell it and do this 1 or 2 more times, and then buy and hold thereafter when you get Dolores age, as we talked about. Yeah. So my number, you know, for anyone that wants to get in touch with me directly, I see the question here is mattsweeting.com or 808-6868. And I just generally believe that everyone should have a realtor in their Rolodex, right? Whether it's, hey, Matt, what do you think about this? Matt, I wanted to get in touch. Let me make contact now before I forget. Say my name is Matt Realtor, but you need to have a realtor on your side and in your contacts for when you are ready. It's like a mechanic or a hairstylist or an attorney. These are the people that you need to have in your Rolodex for when you need it. Any other questions?
We do have a question in the chat. What does the apartment market look like as of now? What is the average price for a duplex, triplex, and what are the hot areas? I guess, I don't know if that's different from what I mentioned earlier.
It is still very hot. There's very little inventory that meets the demands of the 2022 buyer, right? 2022 buyer is more often than not predominantly the late 20s to late 30s buyer. So 27 to potentially 37, who is looking for their first, potentially their second property, more often than not their first. And we know that our generation, we got a little bit of bouge. And so we want, you know, granite countertops at least. We want spacious bedrooms. We want it to not come with a bulletproof vest, and we don't want no flooding. And just those metrics alone makes it a hard find in this market. When we talk about price for that, we're talking 300,000. You know, I remember the days of a duplex being 260, 265. But now a duplex, you know, and even as we go through those numbers that I just went through, you buy a lot at 80,000, you build a 2,000 square foot building, that's 300,000 right there, conservatively speaking. And so, yeah, you're looking about high twos, 285 to 320 for a duplex. If it's older, you could do better than that, right? You could possibly get an older duplex, 10 to 20 years old, at about 250 to 285,000, triplex from 275 to 350 possibly if it's older. Hot areas, you know, we kind of covered that. The West is still hot, but for rental income, if it's exceptionally priced, you could build it anywhere. But your higher yield, the same building in if just to go back to the building we were talking about before, a duplex in Carmichael, a 2-bedroom, 1-bath in Carmichael, you could get. We just rented 2 on Cowpen, and a lot of people, you know, I used to get blazed up on Facebook Marketplace for the pricing, and they blazed me right up for this gentleman who, you know, super landlord in terms of keeping his property clean. He's gated it, but it's on Cowpen. And we have 2 units there, or 3 units rather. 2 of them were vacant with appliances only, that rented for $1,500. And he wants $2,000 for the security deposit. He was fixed on that. Matter of fact, I believe I talked him down and all. And we still have a remaining unit there that's furnished that he wants $2,000 for and $2,500 security deposit. No children, no pets. And so that shows you where the market is. Now it's taken a little bit longer to get it. So we're getting some resistance from the market, which is telling us that we're priced above Cowpen Road, where Cowpen Road should be. But he's the kind, and you know, as I did a video there, I can't wait for all of us to be there, where you could say, Matt, I don't care if it rent next year, this year or next year. I don't care. I want this specific criteria of person, and I'm not willing to flex on that. And that's his position. If they, whenever they come, is fine with him. But in the East, the same unit would be $1,000, possibly $800 to $1,000. And so East skews a little bit lower, same square footage, same details than the West.
Thanks, Matt. One last question. Just piggybacking off of what you just said, in terms of rentals, what do you see as, I guess, in highest demand? Is it 2 bedrooms, 3 bedrooms? What's usually the easiest to rent?
Yeah, a good question. People, you know, all are in high demand. 1 bedrooms are in high demand. 2 bedrooms in high demand. I think the hardest thing for people to find out is 3 bedroom rentals. But again, there's a trade-off, right? So if we were to just run through the scenario right quick, what could a 3 bedroom, let's use Carmichael again, rent for? And we could reason, you know, based on a previous rental we had out there, $2,000, $2,800 if it's nice, right? But if you had 3 1 bedrooms, which is considerably even less than the 3 bedroom footprint, you could probably get $1,200 per 1 bedroom. And so it's a trade-off as it relates to, well, I don't want to deal with 3 separate tenants and the vacancies that might come with that versus the 1 property. But 3 bedrooms, there's a little inventory of rentals for 3 bedrooms, but rentals go quickly if they're priced competitively.
Okay, great. Thank you. I think that's all the questions we have at the moment. So with that being said, I guess I'll pass it back to Jerome.
Yeah,
Certainly.
I do have a question before we wrap up. I think you would have mentioned earlier that it's a seller's market, and I actually was joking about it the other day. I was telling somebody, like, you know, with 400K could have bought maybe a year ago or 2 years ago. You know, it's not 400K anymore. It definitely can't buy. It doesn't have the same purchasing power today. So it appears like the market is moving very fast. Like, can you speak to that? What are you seeing in the market as far as how prices are moving, and how should one who's looking to invest in property perhaps react to it?
Yeah. And before I answer that question, let me just confirm that everybody can see the attachment that I put in the chat. Just let me know if you do not, you could comment no, and then I'll give you an alternative if that's the case. And I think mobile devices might have an issue seeing attachments. Yeah, so what we've been seeing, and just for those that may not know, the way that we define a seller's market is an abundance of buyers and few and little inventory, right? So that means that if I have a house that I could get closer to my appraised or asking price, because there's very little inventory, right? Okay, and I see your comments, guys. So what we've been seeing, the way that someone counteracts that, if you're a buyer, is all of the information that we covered tonight. The way that you get a property in this market is you need to go to the property ready, have a pre-qualification letter, make your deposit for your preferred purchase price to your attorney already. All of these things and aligning the ducks prior to getting on the market is going to work out well for you. Because again, I've seen it so many times where Brandy and Marcus fall in love with the property because they have not either been advised or don't know how to act in the market, that they lose out on the property that they love. And that means that Grammy and the contractor need to come the first time, and you need to be ready to go. And so, while the market is a little bit more, not volatile, but strong, we're in a strong market where buyers need to be more educated, more ready, and quicker to decide. And that in itself presents a challenge for some people. That is what this market is calling for if you're going to succeed. So for those that cannot see the attachment, you can feel free, and I anticipated that would happen. Feel free to send me a WhatsApp, and I can just WhatsApp it to you. My number again is 808-6868, and I'll just respond with that PDF, and you could email it to yourself from there or wherever you want it. Yeah. So
yeah, I re-uploaded it into the chat.
Perfect. Well. Yeah, I see that. Yeah. So again, if you're still having challenges with that, feel free to send me a text, 808-6868, and I will I'll send that to you.
Okay, so thank you very much, Matt. Definitely some valuable information, definitely relevant and applicable to a lot that we are seeing in this real estate market, and even with us, each person making their personal decisions as to what we want to do in real estate. Obviously, we all need somewhere to live, so real estate impacts us, whether it be from home ownership or from an investment perspective. Definitely thank you, Matt, for joining us this evening. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Matt, I know you said you would stay on for maybe another 5 minutes, 10 minutes or so in case somebody has an additional question. But other than that, I just want to remind everybody we have our last seminar of the series next week. It'll be hybrid. We'll be in person at Crypto Isle, which is the old Luciano's, and you'll also be able to tune in via Zoom as well. For those of you that come in person, we are going to have a networking, socializing part of it afterwards. So please, if you do come, please plan to stick around for a little bit. So Matt, I'll turn it back over to you. Any last words you may have, and then, like I said, if any questions anybody comes up with before we shut it down. But thanks again. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, you're most welcome. Again, I appreciate the invitation, and I implore each of you to start your education. That guide really gets you on the track to understanding real estate better. And so I look to hearing from each of you. And relates to that. But again, I also want to implore you that as the CFA Society remind me, this is not a sales pitch. And so whether you choose to work with me for monetary gain or not, use me as a resource and a guide to help you in whatever you're dealing with in real estate. That is not a sales pitch. And I look forward to helping you guys succeed.
Okay, thanks, Matt. Like I said, we'll leave it up for another, say, about 5 minutes or so. If there's no other questions from Matt, then we just shut it down. Thanks, everybody.